My mother looked me in the eye on my 30th birthday and called me selfish into a microphone in front of 40 people. My father held a 3-page list of my sins dating back to age 8, and my sister was live streaming the whole thing to her TikTok followers. They thought they were staging an intervention to fix me, but they did not realize I had a gift of my own. In the next 11 minutes, I played for audio files that ended 6 relationships and changed my life forever. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to support this story. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and leave a comment telling me where you are watching from. Your support helps stories like this reach people who feel alone. My name is Faith. I am an ER nurse. I work long hours in a place where every second matters. For 8 years, I lived a life that felt like it was not mine. I worked double shifts again and again. While others rested, I stayed on my feet. While others spent their money on comfort, I counted every dollar. Every month, I sent money back home. $2,100 without fail. It did not matter if I was tired or sick or overwhelmed. The payment always went through. That money paid my parents' mortgage, covered my mother insurance. It handled my sister's car payment. I became the support system for a whole family. I told myself this is what love looks like. I told myself this is what a good daughter does. I believed that sacrifice was the same as care. But deep inside, something never felt right. I lived in a small apartment close to the hospital. My car was old, a 2014 Civic with scratches on the door, and a weak engine that made a soft shaking sound every time I stopped at a red light. I ate simple meals. Most nights it was pasta that I cooked in batches and stored in containers. It was not a bad life, but it was not a fair one either. What hurt the most was not the work. It was the silence. No thank you. No we appreciate you. No we are proud of you. Just expectation. Every month the same message. Did you send it? I started to feel like a machine. Not a daughter. Not a sister. Just a source of money. Still I kept going. Because I thought if I stopped, everything would fall apart. I thought I was holding the family together. 3 months before my birthday, everything changed. It was a Sunday evening. I went to my parents' house like I always did. We had dinner together. My mother cooked something simple. My father sat in his usual chair. My sister Kristen was on her phone most of the time. It felt normal on the surface. After dinner, I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. That is when I heard voices from the next room. My mother and Kristen were talking. I was not trying to listen, but something in their tone made me stop. My mother said we have to do it in front of people. She will not listen unless she feels pressure. Kristen laughed softly and said it will be perfect content. Real emotion. Raw truth. People love that. I felt my chest tighten. I stayed still. My mother continued. We will invite everyone. Even her boss. If she feels embarrassed, she will never stop sending the money. Kristen said I can stream it. This will blow up. It will help my brand. I remember the exact moment my heart dropped. It was like the ground disappeared under me. They were not worried about me. They were planning something. Something public. Something that would trap me. I walked out quietly. I did not say anything. I did not let them know I heard. But inside something broke. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about their words. About how calm they sounded. About how normal it felt to them to use me. For the first time I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for years. What if I am not helping them? What if I am just making it easier for them to never change? The next morning I went to work like nothing happened. I treated patients. I followed instructions. I smiled when needed. But inside my mind was running in circles. I needed to understand more. I needed to see the truth clearly. Not just hear pieces of it. That is when I made a decision. I would not confront them. Not yet. I would not argue. I would not defend myself. I would observe. I started small. The next Sunday I went again. I placed my phone in my bag with the recording on. I told myself it was just for safety. Just in case. At first nothing unusual happened. Normal talk. Normal dinner. But then little things started to slip out. Comments that felt wrong. Jokes that were not really jokes. My father mentioned money in a way that made it sound like it was expected forever. My mother talked about bills like they were my responsibility. Kristen complained about her life while still depending on mine. Each time I listened later, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I was not imagining it. I was not overthinking it. I was being used. Weeks passed. I kept recording. Not every second, but enough to understand the pattern. Enough to hear the truth when they thought no one was paying attention. I told myself I was not doing this for revenge. I just needed to protect myself. But deep inside, something else was growing. Clarity. The more I listened, the more I saw how carefully everything was planned. The way they spoke about me when I was not in the room. The way they assumed I would never stop. I started to feel something new. Not guilt. Not fear. Strength. For the first time in my life, I began to imagine a different version of my future. One where my paycheck stayed with me. One where my choices were my own. But I also knew something else. If they were willing to humiliate me in public to control me, then this would not end quietly. Whatever they were planning for my birthday was going to be big. And I needed to be ready. I did not know exactly what I would do yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I would not stand there and let them define me anymore. That chapter of my life was about to change. And they had no idea. The weeks before my birthday moved slowly on the outside. But inside me, everything was changing fast. I still went to work every day. I still sent the money at the end of the month. I still showed up for Sunday dinners. But I was no longer the same person sitting at that table. I was watching. I was listening. And most of all, I was understanding. Each recording I made felt like another piece of a puzzle. At first, I told myself I would stop once I had enough to protect myself. But the more I heard, the more I realized how deep everything went. It was not just about money. It was about control. It was about image. It was about keeping me in a place where I could never say no. One Sunday, my father stepped outside to take a call. I stayed near the door without making a sound. His voice was softer than usual. Not the strict tone he used at home. This voice was different. Almost warm. He said, "I miss you too. I will see you soon. Do not worry about anything. I will handle it." I felt a strange tension in my chest. I knew that voice. Not the words, but the feeling. It was not how he spoke to my mother. Later that night, I listened to the recording again. I replayed that moment several times. Each time it became clearer. There was someone else in his life. Someone he was hiding. I did not jump to conclusions right away. But over the next few weeks, more calls came. More soft words. More careful steps outside the house. Then one evening I heard a name. Linda. That name stayed in my mind. I did not know who she was, but I knew she mattered. First I felt confused. Then I felt angry. Not just for my mother, but for everything. For the way my father talked about responsibility while living a different truth behind closed doors. I kept that recording. I saved it carefully. A few days later, something else happened. My mother was in the kitchen talking to a neighbor on the phone. She did not know I was in the hallway. Her voice was low but clear enough. She said, "I already took care of it. No one knows. Not even Faith." There was a pause. Then she laughed quietly. 14,000 is not a small amount, but it was easy. I just moved it before anyone asked questions. My heart started beating faster. I moved closer without making a sound. She continued talking. That old jewelry money from my mother was just sitting there. No one was using it. Now it is helping us. I felt like time stopped. That money was supposed to go to all of us after my grandmother passed. I remember being told there was nothing left. I remember being told I needed to help because the family was struggling. But now I was hearing the truth. She had taken it, hidden it, and still expected me to send money every month as if we had nothing. I walked away slowly before she could see me. My hands were shaking. That night I listened to the recording again and again. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to accept it. This was not a misunderstanding. This was betrayal. A few days passed before I felt steady again. But I did not stop. I could not stop now. Then came the hardest part. Kristen. My sister had always been different from me. She cared about image, about how people saw her. She posted pictures online with perfect captions. She smiled in every photo like life was always beautiful. One evening I visited her apartment. Her husband was in the other room fixing something. Kristen sat next to me scrolling through her phone. A message came in and she rolled her eyes. She stood up and walked into the kitchen with her phone. I followed a few seconds later without thinking. She did not see me at first. She was speaking softly but not enough to hide her words. I am so tired of this life, she said. I feel stuck. He does nothing. I should have never married him. I froze. Her voice was full of frustration. Not a small complaint. Real regret. Then she sighed and said I deserve more. A second later she turned around and saw me. Her face changed instantly. She smiled like nothing happened. I smiled back. But inside I felt something heavy. Later that night I listened to the recording. Her words were clear. Honest. Painful. I thought about her husband. About the way he always greeted me kindly. About how he tried to make things work. And here she was telling someone else she wished she never married him. I saved that recording too. By now I had 3 pieces of truth. My father's secret life. My mother hidden money. My sister hidden feelings. Each one was enough to shake a family. Together they were something else entirely. I did not feel powerful. I did not feel proud. I felt sad. Because this was my family. These were the people I worked for. Sacrificed for. Trusted. And now I was seeing them clearly for the first time. The hardest part was not what they did. It was realizing how long it had been happening. I started to think about my childhood. About moments that did not make sense back then. About the way I was always expected to give more. To do more. To be more. Maybe it was never about love in the way I understood it. Maybe it was always about what I could provide. But something inside me was no longer willing to accept that. As my birthday got closer, the tension grew. My mother started talking about the party more often. She mentioned guests. Decorations. A special moment planned just for me. Kristen kept hinting that it would be unforgettable. That everyone would be there. That it would change everything. My father stayed quiet, but I could feel he knew. I acted surprised. I smiled. I played my role. But inside I was preparing. I organized the recordings carefully. I listened to each one and marked the exact moments that mattered most. I made sure the sound was clear. I made sure there was no confusion. I did not want to hurt anyone. That was never my goal. But I knew one thing for sure. If they were going to put me on display and call me selfish in front of everyone, then I would not stand there empty-handed. I would bring the truth with me. Not as a weapon but as a shield. Because for the first time in my life I understood something important. Silence protects the wrong people. And I was done being silent. The night of my birthday was getting closer. And everything was about to come out into the open. The day of my birthday arrived with a strange calm. I woke up early even though I had barely slept. My room felt quiet in a way that made every thought louder. For a moment I just lay there staring at the ceiling. I asked myself one simple question. Am I ready? I did not feel ready. But I knew I would never feel ready. Some moments do not wait for comfort. They demand truth. I got out of bed and followed my usual routine. I made a simple breakfast. I checked my phone. Messages were already coming in. Happy birthday texts from coworkers. A short message from my mother reminding me to be on time. A message from Kristen with a smiling emoji, and the words "tonight will be special." I looked at that message for a long time. Then I put my phone down without replying. I took a shower and stood under the water longer than usual. I tried to slow my breathing. I tried to steady my hands. I kept telling myself one thing. Stay calm. Stay clear. Do not lose control. After getting ready, I chose a simple outfit. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. I wanted to feel like myself. Not like a version they expected to break. Before leaving my apartment, I checked my bag one last time. My phone was fully charged. The recordings were organized. I had also brought a small Bluetooth speaker. It looked ordinary. Nothing about it suggested what it carried. I held it in my hand for a moment. It felt heavier than it should. Not because of its weight, but because of what it meant. Then I placed it back in my bag and left. The drive to my parents' house felt longer than usual. Every red light felt like a pause I did not ask for. Every turn brought me closer to something I could not stop anymore. When I finally arrived, the house was already full. Cars lined the street. Lights were on inside. I could hear voices and laughter even before I stepped out of my car. I sat there for a few seconds with my hands on the steering wheel. Then I took a deep breath and stepped out. As I walked to the door, I noticed something different. It was decorated more than usual. Balloons. A banner. It looked like a celebration, but something about it felt staged. I opened the door and stepped inside. The room was full of people. Friends. Neighbors. Some relatives. Even a few faces from my workplace. Then I saw her. My supervisor was standing near the center of the room. She smiled when she saw me, but her expression also carried confusion, like she was not sure why she had been invited. That was the moment everything became clear again. This was not just a family gathering. This was a performance. My mother walked toward me with a wide smile. She hugged me tightly and said happy birthday in a loud voice so everyone could hear. Kristen was already holding her phone up, recording. Her smile was perfect, controlled, focused. My father stood near a table holding a few papers. He did not move much. He just watched. I greeted a few people. I tried to act normal. I even smiled a few times. But inside my body felt like it was standing on the edge of something sharp. After a few minutes, my mother clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. The room slowly grew quiet. She stepped forward and picked up a microphone that was placed on the table. That was when I knew it was starting. She looked around the room and then at me. Her smile changed slightly. It became tighter, more serious. She began to speak. She said today is not just a birthday. It is also a moment of truth. I felt my heart start to beat faster, but my face stayed calm. She continued talking about family, about love, about sacrifice. Then her tone shifted. She said sometimes people lose their way. Sometimes they forget where they come from. She looked directly at me. And then she said the word, selfish. The room went still. I could feel every eye on me. Kristen moved slightly to get a better angle with her phone. My father stepped forward and opened the papers in his hand. He started reading. His voice was steady, almost formal. He listed things from years ago. Small mistakes, old arguments, moments from my childhood twisted into something else. Each sentence felt like a weight being placed on my chest. 7 minutes passed like that. 7 minutes of being judged in front of people who did not know the full story. I did not interrupt. I did not react. I just listened. Inside my mind, something strange was happening. I was not breaking. I was observing. Every word they spoke only made one thing clearer. They believed I would stay silent. When my father finished, there was a short silence. My mother stepped closer again and said, "We are doing this because we love you." I looked around the room. Some people looked uncomfortable. Some looked confused. My supervisor looked shocked. I took a small step forward. My voice when I spoke was calm. I said, "Can I have a moment in private?" My mother shook her head immediately. "No," she said. "This is the right place for truth." I nodded slowly. That was all I needed to hear. I reached into my bag and pulled out the Bluetooth speaker. A few people looked at it with curiosity. Kristen tilted her phone slightly, trying to capture everything. I placed the speaker on the table. My hands were steady now. Connected my phone. The room was completely silent. I looked at my mother, then at my father, then at Kristen. And I said, "If we are sharing truth, then let us share all of it." I pressed play. For a second, nothing happened. Then a voice filled the room. My father's voice. Soft. Different. Saying, "I miss you too." The reaction was immediate. People shifted in their seats. My mother's expression changed. My father froze. The recording continued. Linda's name was heard clearly. There was no confusion. No way to explain it away. I did not say anything. I let the audio speak. When it ended, the silence felt heavier than before. I did not wait. I pressed play again. This time it was my mother's voice. Calm, casual, talking about the money. 14,000. How easy it was to take it. How no one knew. Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered that cannot be true. But it was her voice. Clear as day. My mother stepped back slightly. Her face lost color. I could see it in her eyes. She knew. There was no escape from this. I pressed play again. The third recording began. Kristen's voice. Frustrated. Honest. Saying she regretted her marriage. Saying she felt stuck. Her husband, who was standing near the wall, went completely still. His expression changed slowly as the words reached him. Kristen lowered her phone without realizing it. For the first time, she was not performing. She was exposed. The room was no longer a stage. It was a mirror. And no one liked what they saw. I stood there quietly as the last words faded. My heart was beating, but my mind was clear. This was the moment everything shifted. And there was no going back. For a few seconds after the last recording ended, no one spoke. It felt like the air itself had stopped moving. The room that was full of noise just minutes ago had turned into complete silence. Not a peaceful silence, but a heavy one. The kind that presses on your chest. I stood still near the table with the speaker. My hands were relaxed at my sides. I was not shaking anymore. I was not scared anymore. I was just present. Slowly I looked around the room. Faces had changed. The same people who came for a celebration were now witnesses to something they did not expect. Some avoided eye contact. Some looked directly at my parents with disbelief. Some just stood frozen, not knowing what to do next. My supervisor stepped slightly forward. Her expression was serious. She looked at me first, then at my parents. She did not say anything, but her silence said enough. My father was the first to move. He tried to speak, but no words came out at first. His mouth opened, then closed again. The papers he had been holding slipped slightly in his hand. That list of my so-called mistakes suddenly looked small and meaningless. My mother tried to recover faster. She stepped forward and forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. She said, "This is not what it looks like." Her voice was louder now, but it lacked the confidence she had earlier. I did not interrupt her. I did not argue. I simply looked at her. She kept talking, saying things about misunderstanding, about context, about how families have private matters. But every word felt empty, because the truth had already been heard. Kristen looked like she had forgotten how to move. Her phone was still in her hand, but she was no longer recording. Her husband stood a few steps away from her. He was not shouting. He was not angry in a loud way. But his silence was deeper than anything else in that room. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. I watched that moment carefully, not with satisfaction, not with anger, just with clarity. One by one, people began to step back. Some picked up their coats. Some whispered quick excuses. No one wanted to stay in that space anymore. The energy had shifted completely. This was no longer a birthday party. It was the end of something. My father finally found his voice. He tried to say that I had invaded their privacy, that recording them was wrong, that I had crossed a line. I listened to him quietly. Then I spoke for the first time since the recordings ended. I said, "You invited everyone here to judge me in public. You put a microphone in your hand and listed my life like it was a crime report. You called me selfish in front of people who trusted you." I paused for a second and then continued. "I did not expose you. I revealed what you were hiding." The room went silent again. My mother shook her head and tried to speak again, but her words were no longer strong. They were breaking apart before they could even form. Kristen finally moved. She stepped toward her husband and tried to touch his arm. He pulled away slowly, not in anger but in distance. That distance said everything. I could see tears in her eyes, but I did not step in. This was not something I could fix. This was something she had to face. More people started leaving. My supervisor walked toward me. She placed a hand gently on my shoulder and said, "Take care of yourself." Then she left without another word. That simple sentence stayed with me. Take care of yourself. It was something no one in my family had ever said to me. Within minutes, the room was almost empty. The decorations still hung on the walls. The lights were still on. But everything felt different. Like a stage after the audience has gone. Now it was just the four of us. My mother sat down slowly on a chair. My father stood near the wall looking lost. Kristen stood in the middle of the room not knowing where to go. I picked up the speaker and placed it back in my bag. My movements were calm and steady. Then I took out my phone again. They all looked at me but none of them spoke. I opened my banking app. My fingers moved without hesitation. I went through each payment one by one. The mortgage, the insurance, the car payment. For years these had been automatic. A part of my life that I never questioned. Now I looked at each one clearly. I pressed cancel on the first one. Confirm. I pressed cancel on the second one. Confirm. I pressed cancel on the third one. Confirm. Each action felt like a quiet step forward. Not loud, not dramatic, but final. My mother noticed what I was doing. She stood up quickly and said, "What are you doing?" I looked at her and answered simply, "I am stopping." My father stepped forward and said, "You cannot do this. We depend on you." I met his eyes and said that was never supposed to be my role. Kristen finally spoke. Her voice was soft and broken. She said, "Please do not do this right now." I looked at her for a moment. I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. Not for me but for what would happen next. I said, "I am not doing this to hurt you. I am doing this to stop hurting myself." No one had an answer to that. The room fell quiet again. I put my phone back in my bag and took a deep breath. For the first time in years I felt something new. Space. Not just around me but inside me. I walked toward the door slowly. No one tried to stop me this time. No one raised their voice. As I reached the door I paused for a second. I did not turn back right away. I just stood there feeling the moment. Then I turned and looked at them one last time. I said, "I hope one day you understand this was not the day I broke this family. This was the day the truth showed what was already broken." I opened the door and stepped outside. The night air felt cool against my skin. I took a deep breath and walked to my car. For the first time in a long time my steps felt light. Not because everything was fixed, but because I was finally free to choose what happens next. And that made all the difference. I sat in my car for a few minutes before turning the engine on. The street was quiet again. The same street that was full of cars and voices just an hour ago now felt empty. I placed my hands on the steering wheel and took a deep breath. My chest felt lighter but my mind was still processing everything that had just happened. There was no loud feeling of victory. No excitement. No rush. Just calm. Calm I had never felt before. For years my life had been filled with pressure. With responsibility that I did not question. With expectations that I carried like they were part of my identity. But now something had shifted. I was no longer carrying what was never mine to hold. I started the car and drove away slowly. I did not look back in the mirror. I did not need to. That chapter was already behind me. The next few days were quiet. No calls. No messages. No sudden apologies. First it felt strange. I had been so used to constant contact that the silence almost felt loud. But then I started to understand something important. Silence can also be peace. I went back to work. The ER was the same as always. Fast. Intense. Full of life and struggle. But I felt different inside it. I was still helping people. Still doing my job with care. But I was no longer drained in the same way. Because now when I finished my shift I was going home to myself. Not to stress. Not to guilt. Not to another responsibility waiting for me. My paycheck came in at the end of the month. For the first time in 8 years I looked at the full amount and knew it was mine. I sat on my couch that night and just stared at the number for a while. It was not just money. It was freedom. I did something simple with it. I ordered a proper meal. Not meal prep. Not something cheap and quick. A real meal that I enjoyed without thinking about cost. And while I sat there eating, I realized how many small things I had denied myself for years. Not because I could not afford them, but because I believed I did not deserve them. That belief started to fade slowly. A week later, I visited my grandmother. She lived in a small, quiet place. When she opened the door and saw me, her face lit up. She hugged me tightly and asked how I was. For a moment, I did not know what to say. Then I smiled and said, "I am okay." We sat together and talked for hours. I did not tell her everything, not all the details, but I told her enough to be honest. She listened quietly. She did not interrupt. She did not judge. At the end, she held my hand and said something that stayed with me. She said, "You were always the strong one, but now you are also the wise one." That meant more to me than any apology I could have received. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, messages started to come in. My father sent a short text. He said, "We need to talk." I read it but did not reply right away. My mother sent a longer message. She talked about family, about how things went too far, about how she did not expect it to happen like that. Kristen's message was the most emotional. She said she was sorry. She said she was scared. She said she did not know how things got so out of control. I read all of them, but this time I did not react from pressure. I responded when I was ready. I kept my words simple and clear. I said I am open to talk, but things will not go back to how they were. I said respect is not something I will negotiate anymore. I said support does not mean sacrifice without limit. Their replies were slower after that, because now the balance had changed. Not in a way where I had power over them, but in a way where I finally had control over myself. Some relationships started to shift. Some stayed distant, and some may never return to what they once were. But I accepted that, because I understood something new. Not every connection is meant to stay the same, and not every ending is a loss. Sometimes it is a release. Now I am 31. I still work in the ER. I still visit my grandmother. I still care about my family. But I care about myself too. And that changed everything. I learned that boundaries are not walls that keep people out. They are doors that you choose when to open, and who is allowed to walk through. For years I left that door open for everyone, even when it hurt me, even when it cost me everything. But now, I hold the handle, and that is where my peace begins. If this story made you feel something, if you have ever been in a place where you gave too much and received too little, then you are not alone. Take a moment for yourself. And if you want more real stories like this told in a simple, honest voice, then please subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with someone who needs strength, and leave a comment. Your support helps these stories reach hearts that need them the most.